In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful.
Summer rather than spring.
I think it's too early to say when we'll be able to lift some of the restrictions. We're looking at that February the 15th deadline, as you know, for the JCVI groups 1 to 4, the elderly, the vulnerable groups that we want to vaccinate first. At 15 million people across the UK that we want to have been offered a vaccination slot by the 15th of February. We'll look then at how we're doing. But I think what we're seeing in the ONS data, in the REACT survey, we're seeing the contagiousness of the new variant that we saw arrive just before Christmas. There's no doubt it does spread very fast indeed. It's not more deadly, but it is much more contagious, and the numbers are very great. So, as we get the vaccination program out there, as we continue to expand, and I think we're up to 4.6 million people today, 5 million jabs, we've got to observe the lockdown, the stay-at-home message, protect each other, protect the NHS. That's absolutely crucial in what is unquestionably going to be a tough few weeks ahead.
Dutch police clashed with protesters demonstrating against coronavirus rules across the Netherlands on Sunday. Local media reported at least 240 people were detained nationwide. In central Amsterdam, officers unleashed a water cannon after a row of mounted police and canine units moved in on a rally there. Protesters threw stones and fireworks with banners that said "Stop the lockdown." 36-year-old Melissa spoke to Reuters in downtown Amsterdam.
I do not agree with the actual politics in the Netherlands and the restrictions of freedom. The elderly are vulnerable, but there are also many young people who are vulnerable. And young people are the future of this country.
Restaurant owners had organised the Amsterdam protests on the second day of tougher limits, including a nightly curfew for the first time since World War II. Fearing a riot or a disease-spreading event, the mayor designated the museum square as a high-risk zone and gave police the power to preemptively frisk people for weapons. According to the national broadcaster, it was one of at least 10 cities where riot police had been deployed. It also said vehicles had been set on fire and there were reports of rioters looting stores. Schools and non-essential shops have been shut since mid-December, following the closure of bars and restaurants 2 months earlier.
Inequality report released every year, typically at the World Economic Forum, usually held in Davos in Switzerland, has been released and refers to the impact of COVID on India as the inequality virus. The India supplement of the report, produced annually by Oxfam, speaks about how India's wealthiest got richer through the months of the pandemic, while millions continued to languish. The wealth of Indian billionaires increased by 35% during the lockdown. 84% of the households suffered a loss in income in April 2020 alone. Till the end of October, The number of students affected by the closure of educational institutions stood at over 32 crores. Of those, 84% reside in rural areas and 70% attend government schools. Oxfam India survey reports close to 40% of teachers in government schools fear that prolonged school closure might lead to a third of students not returning once schools in fact reopen. Education impacted due to the digital divide. Well, the report says only 4% of rural households had a computer and less than 15% rural households had an internet connection. Out of a total of 122 million who lost their jobs, 75%, which accounts for 92 million jobs, were lost in the informal sector. So those are some of the hard-hitting parts of the Global Inequality Report as far as India is concerned.
White-knuckle scenario as an Arizona National Guard team rescued 3 stranded hikers. It happened in Haribo Canyon near Sedona. The trio of out-of-town outdoor enthusiasts had been hiking and rock climbing. They'd only planned to be out for a few hours. But when harsh weather rolled in, they were trapped in the canyon. They ended up spending more than 48 hours in the cold with few supplies. Rescuee Scott Brand spoke by phone to KPHO.
The worst part was definitely our feet. We had only, we had the same wet socks on the whole time, so I was concerned about frostbite and, losing a foot.
Help came in the form of a Black Hawk helicopter, courtesy the National Guard.
Seeing that crew chief lean out of that helicopter and wave down to us was the best feeling I think I've ever had.
One of the rescuers described what happened next.
Once I get them up, I physically bring them inside. They looked very exhausted. They were all showing signs of cold weather. However, they seemed to be very, very thrilled to get inside that aircraft at that point.
The rescuers knew that time was of the essence.
In any one of these rescue situations, as time goes down, the chances of a successful recovery go down significantly with it. The faster you can get out there, faster get them out there and get them in a warm ambulance, the better off they have.
The grateful rescuees are being treated and should be okay.
We're definitely thankful that the outcome was what it was. It could have been worse.
This
The search continues tonight for the men who attacked a woman after she told one of them she didn't want him to buy her a bottle of wine. Tonight, she's getting a show of support from her community, calling for justice. CBS 2's Corey James reports from Harlem.
A large crowd of people stretched across 128th Street in Harlem Saturday night, many of them standing directly in front of this liquor store where a 31-year-old mother was brutally beaten Monday. The demonstration was the end of a rally that began 3 blocks away as women, men and children stood on the corner speaking out against violence targeting the neighborhood.
If we don't do it, who is? It's our responsibility. It's our duty to protect our women and children in our community.
It could have been me, my daughters, my mother, any female. The community as a whole, we all need to stick together.
Earlier this week, CBS 2's Lisa Rosner spoke with the woman assaulted. She says the man wearing a red parka in this surveillance video offered to pay for her wine, but she politely declined. After checking out and walking out the store, the woman says a group of men chased her across the street, then kicking her, one of them even biting her on the forehead.
No matter how much I asked, I'm trying to get to my daughter, please leave me alone. I said I'll call the cops. He didn't care about that. He had one thing on his mind, and that was to attack me. That's what he wanted to do.
The victim's family members showed up to the rally in support of their cousin, who they say is still traumatized.
People can't think that they can do what they want to do. No means no.
Senseless, no reason. She didn't even know them. We need them caught. That's our main objective.
And police are hoping this footage will help make that happen so that the woman who was attacked can have justice and her sense of security restored.
I definitely want to see him locked up and put underneath the jail for what he did to me, because I didn't deserve this.
And the woman assaulted says one of the men also took off with her phone after snatching it out of her hand. Police say they have no new leads in this investigation and are asking anyone with information to contact them. In Harlem, Corey James, CBS 2 News.
Конечно же, прототип, на котором мы получаем огромное количество данных, тестов, и эти данные помогают нам уже перейти к нашей мечте, построить серийные машины, которые будут выглядеть примерно так. То есть здесь такая же схема дрона применяется, такие же ходовые двигатели, но те двигатели, которые мы здесь проверяем, тестируем, двигатели Вентури пойдут уже полностью во всю машину. Здесь есть уже обтекатель, здесь есть кабина, комфорт для пассажиров. И именно так будут выглядеть летающие машины, дроны-такси, ховеры. Уже даже в этом году мы планируем построить несколько таких машин.
End the Muslim ban, a policy rooted in religious animus and xenophobia.
By keeping the promises I made to the American people. A long way to go. These are just executive actions. They are important, but we're going to need legislation for a lot of the things we're going to do.
Biden is pushing to get new stimulus relief into the hands of struggling Americans, with or without Republican help. CBS News correspondent Christina Ruffini is at the White House tonight. Christina, good evening.
Good evening. President Biden's only public appearance today was a trip to church. But behind the scenes this week, aides say he was working the phones, dialing up Democrats and Republicans to try to get his message through. President Biden spent the week doing what he could to convince Americans to get on board with his COVID relief plan.
The COVID relief has to pass. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
The almost $2 trillion package includes $20 billion for a national vaccination program, $15 billion in grants for small businesses, and a third round of direct payments, $1,400 to most Americans. The White House wants Republican buy-in for the package, but so far it's been a tough sell. Many GOP lawmakers, including Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy, say they've got sticker shock.
Republicans can be there, but it can't just be spending $1.9 trillion pulled out of the air with no justification.
With new figures showing 2020 was the worst year for the American economy since 1946, Senator Elizabeth Warren says Democrats will go forward, with or without the GOP.
But if the Republicans aren't going to do it, then Democrats got elected not just to stand around and debate in Washington. They got elected to deliver, and that is exactly what we should do.
And with those temporary fences still standing around the Capitol, lawmakers are also struggling to agree on how best to handle their own security. Yesterday, the FBI offered a $100,000 reward for information on the person seen in this Washington Post video planting pipe bombs near the Capitol the night before it was overrun by an angry mob. Brian Sicknick, the officer killed in those riots, will lay an honor in the Capitol this week, providing a rare opportunity for divided lawmakers to come together to honor his service and sacrifice. Adriana?
This was supposed to be a demonstration against new police powers. Instead, it descended into violent clashes. France is a frustrated country, under curfew for 12 hours a day, and so far hobbled by a sluggish vaccine rollout. That frustration boiled over. What started as a good-natured demonstration about the shortcomings of the way the French government has handled this pandemic has now degenerated into a series of very angry conflicts between the demonstrators and the French riot police. The day had started with a march protesting not just about police powers, but also about the government, about its management of the pandemic.
There's frustration here in France because people think we aren't doing things as well as other countries. Personally, I think it's a good thing that we're a bit behind. It allows us to see how things work and that things go well before really rolling out a wide-scale vaccination programme.
France's vaccination programme started incredibly slowly, but it's now accelerated. That sense of sluggishness still haunts, though, not just in France, but across most of the continent.
Without a doubt, the start was also difficult in recent weeks. A lot of frustration has arisen regarding the hotlines. Frustration has arisen regarding the question of deliveries, why more isn't being delivered. I also understand the impatience well, very well.
And then layer into this an argument between the European Union and AstraZeneca, and you have the ingredients for real geopolitical tension. Maybe that's why the European Commission blundered into its hasty decision over the Irish border. Officials wanted to look decisive and strong. Instead, they've since been vilified.
I think the starting point is very simple on this. This virus is transnational, it's cross-border. That's why cooperation on vaccines has to be transnational and cross-border as well. I think it was a mistake. Good that the Commission pulled it out. I do think they should even think about apologizing.
With that major winter storm moving across the country, starting in the West Coast and slamming into the heartland as we come on tonight, and heading to the East Coast, D.C., Philly, New York, and Boston in the bullseye. At this hour, more than 100 million people under winter weather alerts. The powerful storm sweeping through Southern California and further north, take a look at this, washing out parts of Highway 1 near Big Sur, sending mudslides down the hills burned by fire in the San Gabriel Valley. Heavy snow in the mountains, semis under several feet of snow in Truckee, California, near the Nevada border. And the snow, look at this, now reaching the suburbs just outside of Chicago and beginning to accumulate outside Wrigley Field downtown. This video courtesy of EarthCam. The Northeast already in a deep freeze, now making emergency preps for a major snowfall. ABC senior meteorologist Rob Marciano leads us off.
Tonight, the Northeast in a deep freeze. Millions enduring bitter cold temperatures. Fountains frozen over in New York City amid single-digit wind chills. And the region now bracing for a powerful winter storm and potentially blizzard conditions.
We understand that it's going to be significant. Please stay off the roads as much as you possibly can.
That system, now in the Midwest, has been hammering the West Coast for days. Some areas of California digging out from a staggering nearly 9 feet of snow. Tragically, one skier lost his life after becoming trapped in the deep snow. South of Reno, first responders rescuing a man after his vehicle got stuck. And on the coast of California, massive amounts of rain. Part of the iconic Highway 1 washing away south of Big Sur. Caltrans officials say they don't have an estimate yet for when that stretch of roadway will reopen. In the LA area, dozens of accidents on rain-slicked roads as the system moved through there. This big rig overturning, the cab going over the guardrail. Luckily, the driver not seriously hurt.
Incredible that driver's okay. Rob joins us now. Rob, time out this storm for us.
Well, it really did a number on the West Coast, Tom, and now it has the eastern half of the country in its crosshairs. Look at all the areas that are going to be impacted by winter weather. Over 20 states with warnings now in Philly, D.C., and Chicago. That's where you're seeing impacts right now. That's where the snow's piling up. In northern Illinois and Indiana, the roads are getting bad there. There are some heavy rains across the southern part of this, but the winter weather is going to be the highest impact. It gets into Indiana and Ohio tomorrow, and it weakens somewhat. The coastal lows take shape during the day tomorrow. D.C., Baltimore, you really get it tomorrow afternoon. afternoon, Philly tomorrow night, New York then into Monday, and Tuesday somewhat some rain mixing in along the coastline. That'll keep some of the numbers down as far as accumulation go, but high winds and accumulations that could exceed 10 inches in some spots in Pennsylvania. Tom?
Echer, hebt u nog wachsen, nu? Ich kann gehen. Aber ich sage, bleibt stehen, Sie pikuach nefesh. Aber ich sage, bleibt stehen.
Of LTCM, and some will even go back to 1907 in J.P. Morgan. You and I have both been in that hallowed room at the J.P. Morgan Museum on Madison Avenue. Cohn and Griffin of hedge fund fame have come in and bailed out a hedge fund, short GameStop that's wrong. Are we seeing history repeat itself?
This is a repeat of what we saw in 1902 when the Northern Pacific Railroad was squeezed by Kuhn Loeb, by Harriman, by, I'm trying to remember the name of the other fellow that was involved in that squeeze, but the stock went from $40 to $1,000 a share. It came, that was when we had that great comment that was made, he who sells what isn't his'n must buy it back or go to prison. And that's what's happened. We have the most amazing short squeeze going on. I've lived through a short squeeze in wheat. I've seen short squeezes at the turn of the century, but this one is 1902 revisited. This is unbelievable. The public is making money, but the problem lies in the fact that with as many hedge funds as being caught short, and watching to this morning, what we traded $335, $340, $350 a share in GameStop, which was trading $60 a share a mere week and a half ago. You're going to have selling in other areas, and look what's going on with the Dow this morning. We got the Dow down, what, 150 points, because hedge funds that are caught short are having to sell other stocks to raise cash. This is a very serious circumstance right now.
Dennis, you and I remember the sweat of August of 1998, where all of a sudden it wasn't a parlor game of people with fancy suits and ties driving Ferraris or Maseratis. What this comes down to, Dennis, is at some point it rolls back onto global Wall Street. Do you anticipate this here, or can they keep this discreet to a few recalcitrant hedge funds?
I think it's going to be. I think it has wider implications than a few recalcitrant that easy for you to say. Recalcitrant hedge funds. There's a number of stocks out there that are heavily shorted. We've got a lot of people talking about the fact that so many stocks are shorted. The public is coming in on Reddit. The public is coming in on Netflix and things like. Well, not Netflix, but coming in on other internet. I'm lost for a word right now because I'm caught with what's happening. It's just astonishing to watch. But this has wider implications for the near term. I think that I think you're going to see a number of hedge funds declare bankruptcy in the next several days. And given a new administration that is tenants,
likely base the jet left from. It flew over the village for about an hour, starting around noontime on July 12, 2020. 12 members of the Majali family were in and around their single-story mud and stone home, and it had 6 rooms. Mrs. Juma Majali was making lunch with her 2 daughters-in-law, Nawal and Noura. About an hour later, they served the meal and called the 8 children together to eat in the living room. Her teenage daughter Nasim left to the bathroom, and daughter-in-law Noura went to a bedroom to breastfeed her baby Kanas. Mrs. Majali's teenage son Ghazi was watching TV next door. When the missile struck at 1:10 all those in the living room were killed. So was Nasim in the bathroom. Only teenage Ghazi, in one of the back bedrooms, survived but was badly burned, alongside Noura and her baby, who had minor wounds because they too were at the rear of the house. In all, 9 of them died that day. We were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened. We gathered a pile of evidence and sent our team back to get more. The only survivors now live hundreds of kilometres away, but we tracked them down.
I was screaming for help. I was in shock, she says. The house was destroyed. I was searching for my daughter, but she was dead. Then I saw my sister-in-law, and she was dead too. I just picked up my son and screamed for help.
Mrs. Majali's teenage son Ghazi is in a separate home, again far away. He can't remember much, but his cousins can.
We only recognised his mother from her torso. That was all that was left of his mother. We only managed to identify one of the small children from his face. It was his brother's son. His arms were cut off. And his sister-in-law, she had no leg and no arm, and she was totally burned.
It struck us then how remote the house was, despite claims from the coalition about a possible military target there.
At the UN in New York, diplomats say there is now a small window of opportunity for movement in one of the world's longest-running conflicts. At the end of President Trump's administration, Israel signed normalization deals with 4 Arab nations, but there was no progress on the biggest underlying problem, peace between Israelis and Palestinians. At a virtual meeting of the UN Security Council, many countries were represented by their foreign ministers, but because the new US Secretary of State at this point hadn't been confirmed by the Senate, and neither had the new UN ambassador, the United States was represented by its deputy ambassador.
I thought it useful to share with you some of the contours of the U.S. approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
What he said was important. For the first time in 4 years, the US is calling for direct talks to lead to a two-state solution. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov added to this, proposing an international conference or ministerial meeting this summer. One of the newest members of the Security Council is Norway, which has had a historic role, brokering the Oslo Accords over a quarter of a century ago. The foreign minister told me there was only one way there'll be progress.
There has to be will by both parties. They have to assume responsibility for pushing the talks forward. The Security Council, Norway and others, we can assist. We can do everything we can to lay the foundation for talks. But the parties themselves has to step up.
It's worth noting that the Israeli ambassador said in the meeting that the idea of an international conference was pointless and a distraction. And further complicating things, both Israelis and Palestinians are due to have elections in the coming months. However, some diplomats say that could be a good thing, further shaking up the dynamics surrounding this long-running conflict. James Bays, Al Jazeera, at the United Nations.
At an Air Force base in the south of Taiwan, fighter jets practice for an incursion towards the island by military planes from nearby mainland China. Jets have been scrambling for real more often as China has stepped up its military patrols, most recently last weekend. It seems to be Beijing's reminder that it will always regard Taiwan as part of China, and it's prepared to take it back by force if necessary.
We make no promise to renounce the use of force and reserve the option to use all necessary measures. Our position has been consistent and will not change.
Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen, inspecting her military's preparedness, says the island is ready for any aggression.
From last year, our radar stations have detected incursions by nearly 2,000 Chinese military aircraft and over 400 military vessels. We drove them away in a timely manner and secured our maritime and airspace.
Increased activity across the Taiwan Strait comes as the US conducts a so-called freedom of navigation exercise, sending an aircraft carrier group into the nearby South China Sea, angering Beijing, which regards it as largely its own. During the recent turbulent years of the Trump administration, Taiwan has often been caught in the middle of strained relations between China and the US. And the new Biden administration might not mean an end to that turbulence.